Now, Oana is going to present what is the bioeconomy, the regenerative features of organization, and how we can address that through a corporation lens.
Thank you so much, Diane Laure. The whole agenda for biodiversity, conservation, regeneration, brought to the front lines by COP15 has been a work in progress for many years. The word bioeconomy goes back to the early 2000s, and there is even deeper history in organization studies about organizing with and for the life-giving ecosystems on the planet. My own specialty at the intersection of strategy, sustainability, and entrepreneurship looks at how ecosystems can be regenerated through careful, mindful intervention by human actors. And Marty Outland, Running Tide, is one of my absolute favorite stories of what is possible when humans interact with non-humans, with plants and animals and ecosystems in a very attentive and what we call biocentric, centered on the life-giving mechanisms of the ecosystem. The original conversation around the bioeconomy started in the mid-2000s. And at that time, it was extremely important to set a benchmark and to create strategic goals. But progress was very slow against those benchmarks. And by any metrics, we have very small percentages, 1 to 1.5% of the GDP as we measure it today is allocated to the ecosystem services. And this is a horrendous error because the picture of how much ecosystem services contribute is in the very high percentages. So you're going to hear numbers of 40 to 70%. And I'd like you to encourage that about half of the universe and half of the economy depends in critical ways on the bioeconomy. And specifically, if we estimate on the percentage of the global GDP, we're looking at a 50% of the entire global GDP that depends on natural ecosystem services. This number is extremely high. 70% of the world's most vulnerable people depend directly on wild species. So when we start looking at how businesses can evolve in connection with nature and develop life-giving combinations, we start asking, how can we turn this around? And very specifically, when we talk about climate adaptation, we're looking at 40% of the reduction in greenhouse emissions coming directly and being tethered to biosystems. And that number is even higher. It's about a 60% if we estimate the new business models that will come into play. So I am working on regenerative models of organizing for the last 5 years. I've convened a number of special issues and conversations among the academic community. And the word regenerative, largely through our work, has been picked up as a designation of strategy. So regenerative strategy, regenerative practice. And we define regeneration at the system level, not at the organizational level, because it depends on these connections with biological ecosystems. And we very much want to emphasize that this is not, regeneration is not about fixing and protecting, but about working with nature in a way that allows the system to continuously restore its capacity to self-organize and evolve. So this is drawing a lot of attention to the new and unfolding explosion of flourishing of national climate mitigation that really put nature front and center. Most countries now have bioeconomy, blue-green. We're going to go into details of those, but it's the green bioeconomy, also known as green growth, has been in the early stages in the last 2 decades, give or take, been associated with this new way to find a new recipe for growth. But it's very important to appreciate that it's not about growth as much as about interaction, connection, inclusion, and mindful interactions with nature. Let's go to the blue bioeconomy, where there is a lot of action and a lot of new business models and a new funding models. And the blue bioeconomy has been featured quite eloquently in Europe as part of their 2030 agenda. It's important to understand that this is a radical reversal of how business is done, but it's a self-sustaining. It speaks to our ability to find nutritious ways to eat. It speaks about reducing our dependence on fossil fuel and non-renewable strategies. And it also is one of the key avenues to adapt to climate change. And here in Canada, for those in the audience that are Canadians, let's go to the next slide. It is coming, and we can do a lot better given our proximity to 3 oceans, our vast shorelines, and our history of not always doing well by the natural resources we are supposed to steward. This is important for many communities. It's every day more important as the Arctic Council starts foregrounding the role of rivers and natural ecosystems. And I believe this is time to hand over the reins to Gal to introduce. Oh no, sorry, I have a couple more teasers for you. Bad news, bad news. We have just crossed the 5th planetary boundary. Good news is that the very ecosystems we are currently exploiting are very much part of our recovery. And by full agreement, 40% of that recovery will come from our new models of regenerative organizing. And next slide. Many treat this as a revolution in the way we organize, we manage our supply chains, we manage our consumption, we manage our taste and preferences. But it is also, I'd like to end by emphasizing that this is really the future we see and also the future we are making, because a lot of the global progress depends on our ability to create new products, new services, and new ways of being in connection with an evolving nature.